everybody. Welcome back to the Messy City podcast. This is Kevin Klinkenberg here. I'm recording this just before Thanksgiving, but it will actually drop after Thanksgiving. So I hope everybody had a good holiday and was able to take a little time for themselves, for family, to hopefully eat a little too much food and maybe drink a little too much wine or whatever suits you. And just enjoy the nice long holiday weekend. It's always one of my favorite times of the year, not just because my birthday is coming up as well, but it's just a great time of year to relax a little bit and catch up with friends and family and be thankful. Be thankful for all the good things that have happened in your life. I think having that kind of attitude is healthy, and I'm certainly very thankful. I've had many, many good and fortunate things happen in my life. I'm very thankful for my family and for my health and the health of friends and all that I care about. And there's much to be thankful for, no matter your circumstance. And I hope you all can take some time to do that. I hope you had some time to do that. And here's hoping the next year will also bring many things to be thankful for. So now I'm going to take a different direction. While I certainly am thankful, I wanted to talk about a topic today that is frequently on my mind and has been for years, that is I might put under just generally the banner of some of the blind spots that we have as urban boosters. And generally, when I talk about this, I'm not talking about people who just like walkable places in whatever shape or form they have. I'm talking about the kind of people like myself who generally live in big cities or the most or more urban parts of big cities. All of my adult life, I've lived in the more urban locations in my region, whether that's here in Kansas City or in Savannah. And that's just my nature. I love those kinds of places. I'm a city person. I love getting out and walking around. I like enjoying the life of being in the city. And that suits me. It's not to say there aren't other things that I enjoy in different kinds of communities or places, but in terms of my lifestyle and what I'd like to have, I have always enjoyed a more urban place. But I think one thing I've noticed a lot, and that I have often challenged friends and colleagues on, is just taking a harder look at our own blind spots. So for those of us who live in this milieu, so to speak, especially those of us who are in sort of a professional class, urbanites, in a different era, they would have called us all yuppies. Really, that term is actually still pretty apt in many ways, except for perhaps the young part. But the idea of, those of us who are kind of urban professionals and live and work in that world, like those kinds of places, we tend to have our own blind spots. And we often look at other groups of people in society and say, how can you not see this problem or that problem? How do you not understand, maybe your own contradictions of something that you enjoy or promote? But we tend to fail to see our own blind spots, especially those of us who are real boosters for big cities, for urban areas. And so I want to talk about a few things that I have seen repeatedly or have come to my mind, in ways in which I think those of us who are urban boosters would do better to pause and kind of look in the mirror and ask ourselves some harder questions and challenge ourselves. So I'm going to start by something that is really not it's becoming like less and less of an issue these days. But it's certainly something that I used to see frequently 20 or 30 years ago. I find this a lot in the realm of public policy, but I've seen it an awful lot with developers as well. For a long time, it kind of felt like the people who were developing in our city, in our urban area, and I'm speaking here specifically of Kansas City, where I've lived most of my adult life, there was this, incredible desire on the part of many to really suburbanize the urban area. So this topic is going to be a little bit different than some of the others that I'll touch on because it really has changed in important ways. But one of the things that I noticed and used to complain about a lot was it felt like people didn't really people who were actively building or trying to rebuild our cities didn't really understand the value of the places that they were working in. So I remember one quote years ago from Andres Dewani, the famous planner and architect, where he used to do this series of videos that were lectures of his that were all about urban design and places. And I actually think some of these are still out there and available on YouTube. You used to actually buy them as VHS tapes, if you can believe that. I still have those VHS tapes somewhere, probably in the basement. But they were great sort of cornerstones of learning the basics about urban design. And Andreas always had a really great way of being blunt with people to help them understand strengths and flaws of their arguments or whatever it is they were trying to do. And he had a way of talking about the difference between suburban and urban communities that I thought was really helpful to understand, and doing it in a way that was not so judgmental. And really the essence of that was that each type of development, and those are two very dramatically different patterns of development, the urban and the suburban, all over our country. Each of them has a certain amenity value that attracts people. For suburban areas, the amenity value is really the private space. It's the yard. It's the quiet nature of that. It's the easy parking. And that really, and the sense of order that you have in many suburban areas. That those are the things that are really attracting people, the extra space, the privacy that comes with that. In essence, what I've talked about before is with suburbia, we learned how to build the private realm incredibly well. And for those people who live in suburban areas or have lived in them, you recognize what I'm talking about, that the private spaces are as good as you can find anywhere in the world. It's really just the public spaces that are lacking and where people feel like something is missing. But the private spaces, that private realm, the ease of parking, et cetera, those are real amenity value notions, especially for a society that's oriented around driving and cars. In urban communities, however, the amenity value is actually the public space and the walking experience. Those are the things that really attract people to living in an urban place. Excuse me. So it's the idea that whenever you leave your home or apartment and you go out walking around, that there's going to be interesting street life. There's going to be beautiful buildings to look at. There's going to be attractive public spaces, whether those streets or squares or plazas or whatever that you're walking through, that those are the things that are of utmost value to you being in that location. It's the life of the city and the people and the beauty of that experience. Being out in public is really the joy, the important amenity value for an urban place. And I always felt like that was a really great way to frame it, and one in which that we failed at routinely, especially in my city. For many, many years, development seemed to proceed as if we were trying to destroy that amenity value of urban places, whether on purpose or just out of ignorance. And we're in many ways trying to bring like a suburban amenity value into our neighborhoods, into our downtown and urban areas. And it's no coincidence that those just didn't really mesh very well. They didn't work very well. And when our urban areas started to turn around, it was really because people were recognizing the incredible value of the architecture that existed, the public spaces that were beautiful, that were created over 100 years before, the attractiveness of the walking experience. And as we focused on those, and as we got better at enhancing those, that's when it really starts. You start to see a great return on investment in the urban areas because that's what people value. It's not to say other things aren't important, but that life in public space is what the value was, and we lost sight of that for many, many years, and made a lot of mistakes. And some very big mistakes in trying to effectively suburbanize our urban areas when we all along should have been trying to just continue to urbanize them because that is the appeal. That's what people are willing to pay for. That's what some people are willing to pay a lot of money for, is to have that incredible value of life in cities. So, like I said, I think that has really changed over the years. The development community, I think in particular, has really started to understand that and deliver projects now that are just immensely better in terms of how they treat public space and take care of it, and understand that people in cities really enjoy seeing other people and lingering and being around others, and that's the value. That's how you can get more people to live there. So, I felt like as urban boosters years ago, we used to not understand that very well, and we overlooked it to our own detriment. And we were all too willing to kind of accept any investment, whatever it was, as good, no matter whether it was urban or suburban. And I found that to be a source of constant frustration because it felt like we weren't, enhancing what it was that we were actually good, well, the qualities that we had that were good to begin with. And even in places that have deteriorated a lot, if you're in a community that was fortunate enough to have developed in the era prior to, say, the 1930s, you probably have some really terrific neighborhoods and buildings and everything else that were just waiting to be reactivated. And unfortunately, we tore a lot of that down and kind of made them into lousier versions of new suburban development that have not held up well over time, and probably didn't really stop the bleeding anyway. So I think it's really just a great lesson in understanding what is it the value. If you think of cities as a consumer product, and that may be anathema to many of you, but in many ways they are. We are often choosing where we want to live for a variety of reasons. But so if you think of it as a consumer product, you have to understand what is it that people are choosing and why. And if you're an urban booster like myself, we've got to understand the reasons that people love these communities to begin with, and what will attract more people to them. So that is kind of a good transition to a subject that is much more difficult. But what I see in the discourse a lot here locally, on social media, et cetera, and that really is around the topic of sort of public order or disorder. So recently here in Kansas City, I'm going to bring up a story that was in the news and just kind of talk about it from a different angle. I hope. There was a guy who went public who runs an engineering company here in the downtown area, and he said, "You know what? I've had enough of the homelessness and the crime issues, and we're going to move our company to a suburban location because it's just going to be better for myself and my employees." And it's just not working for him to be in the city. There's just too many problems they're running into that relate to those issues on a daily basis. And the guy, all the local urbanist types and downtown boosters, et cetera, are going to drag this. They dragged him on Twitter and mocked what he was saying and everything else. And I think a lot of that is because they didn't like his politics. I think we all know that the political leanings of sort of the urban professional class lean one way. And I think this guy's, if you read the things that he wrote or he talked about, clearly his political leanings are the other direction. So then you get sort of the tribal impulse that we have here to just drag on the other person because they're on the other team. and that's kind of life in America in 2023, unfortunately. And I, I looked at it differently, and I continue to look at it differently. And here's what I would encourage people to think about. Um, you may not like the messenger, but we should listen to the message. Um, the reality is, in our city and in most big cities in America, we have problems with public order or disorder and crime. It is a huge problem. It is a real issue. Uh, I happen to encounter this on a daily basis with the work that I'm doing, but I know other people encounter it in very tragic ways themselves. And one of the things that I think frustrates me is we get to this place where because because if you're a city person, you feel like you have to defend your city no matter what. If you're an urban person, you have to defend the urban uh, mindset or the love of urban places no matter what, no matter how poorly something is run or how many bad things happen. And uh, look, this is just the reality of living in a big city in in most big cities in America today. There is much more rampant um, uh, issues with street crime, with crimes of all kinds. Um, we have problems with schools that just aren't doing nearly as well as their counterparts in suburban areas. And we pay higher taxes for the privilege of uh, living in these circumstances. And my my message here is that there are those of us who are kind of the weirdos that don't really maybe mind all that so much, but we are the weird ones, and these are problems and issues that the majority of people really do care about. How the schools educate your kids, the opportunity, to opt to live in a place where you don't have to deal with crime or especially street crime very much. These are real issues to most people, and they are legitimate issues. We put up with way too much in cities just because we want to defend living in cities. And I get that. I understand there's a competitive nature to all of us. If somebody runs down your town, you want to defend it no matter what its problems are. And I understand that. I've certainly done that myself over the years. But ultimately, if you're willing to just overlook obvious problems in your place, then that is a recipe for long-term decline and failure. And my belief is that urban boosters in my community and elsewhere are just way too accepting of failed and failing systems, because we like living in cities. And so we put up with way too much. We put up with paying much higher tax rates than our suburban or rural counterparts. We put up with crime that is much too high. That's just really unacceptably high. And we often put up with lousy educational systems for our children. And we do that strictly, I think, as a tribal defense mechanism. So that's not to say that things don't get overstated. There definitely are people who, especially in our country, where we're a wealthy country, life generally is very comfortable. If you have grown up and lived your life in suburban areas and never really encountered life in cities, there probably are things that might freak you out that are just ridiculous and silly on their face. Just seeing, a homeless person, yeah, that's not like a problem. Uh, But if you grow up in a lot of suburbs, you never have to really encounter that directly. Um, so I get the sense that some criticisms can be silly, but there also are many that are totally legitimate, and our denial of these issues, our denial of the importance of these issues to the vast majority of people, is what holds our cities back from truly thriving, because we don't address them with enough seriousness, enough of a level of importance. And by contrast, a lot of the suburban communities really do address these, quite well. They maintain much more of a sense of public order. They have much lower tolerance for a lot of basic crime, and they really put a focus on their schools. And those, again, are the things that tend to drive people's choices on where to live. Another thing that Andres Duany said with some controversy years ago when he was advising the city of Los Angeles on some downtown redevelopment efforts, this was probably 30 years ago. So really before much of the recent wave of redevelopment in downtown LA. But he said, if you want to revive your downtown, take your 4 best schools and put them downtown. And again, that was the kind of thing that a lot of people thought was flippant and ridiculous. But yet there was a lot of truth to it. And real people make choices on where to live and where to stay based on those core issues in their life that matter to them: their children, their safety, and their pocketbook. And so our cities, if we really care for them to thrive, to grow, if you're wanting your city to grow, as I believe you should want your city to grow, if you want it to change or improve, we have to align ourselves with these things that matter to the vast majority of people, not to that cadre of weirdos like myself who are probably going to live in cities regardless, because it appeals to something in our nature. So that's a real challenge for a lot of urban boosters, because a lot of those of us who consider ourselves urban boosters probably are outside the mainstream on how we think about place. Another element of all this, or another way to look at it, I suppose, is spend some time in some suburban areas. If you're an urban guy or an urban gal, get out there and really observe suburban communities from the perspective of somebody who's looking for a place to live, and is looking at critical amenities like safety, cleanliness, schools. You'll find often that as much as the typical suburban style development approach, doesn't appeal to me, I would say most people are ambivalent about that development approach in the United States. And what they see is they'll go to a newer place or a suburban place, and things are well kept. The lawn is mowed, the parks are taken care of, and things are clean, and there's new equipment. The schools look like safe places to be. The shopping areas are well maintained. And that's what really matters to a lot of people. One of the reasons that I would say is funny, years ago, when I was early involved in what we call the new urbanism today, one of the real frequent comments that we'd especially hear in the architecture world was, well, I'm not a new urbanist. I'm just an urbanist, or I'm an old urbanist. And be like, okay, that's fine. I'm not really sure why we're fighting about terms, but that's okay. And then one of the clarifying moments again came from Duany, who said, no, you don't understand. The reason we call it the new urbanism is because today there are choices. Today, you can choose to live in the suburbs if you want to. 150 years ago, there was only the urban condition. There wasn't suburbia as we know it today. And so everybody effectively lived that lifestyle. And today, if you don't want to, if you don't want to live in your urban community, you can choose to move to a suburb. And many, many people prefer that lifestyle and that approach. And again, I'm not here to defend it or say that one's right or one's wrong, but the reality is people have choices. And as urban boosters, it's important for us to understand and realize that nothing we do exists in a vacuum. Whatever policies, whatever management approaches, whatever we emphasize in our place has effects that ring beyond ours. And for normal people who are looking to just either rent a place or buy a place, understand that they can look at A versus B, and they might care about different things than those of us who are the hardcore urbanites really like. There aren't that many of us. I guess that's the last point I would make, or a different way to say it is, those of us who are really the hardcore urbanites who are probably going to live in a city no matter what. There really aren't that many of us. I think I've looked at lots and lots of preference surveys over the years and demographic and psychographic analyses, and it's probably no more than 15 or 20% of people uh, in any given region that are really diehard urbanites that are probably going to stay there and live in that type of lifestyle no matter what. And so if we want our urban communities to succeed, as I think we should want them to do, we have to understand what matters to the majority of people and not dismiss those because maybe you don't like the messenger. So that's something I wish we could just generally do in many of our discussions about policies or issues in society, is to focus less on the messenger and think about the actual issue or the message. But I know we have a terribly hard time doing that these days. Maybe it's always been that way, but it certainly seems like that's the case now. So consider the message, not the messenger, and let's take a step back. Be honest about your place. Be brutally honest if you want it to succeed, and be willing to entertain harsh criticism, learn from it, and go get better. If we follow that path, your community will get better. If we are just reflexively defensive or mocking of other places, we've missed an opportunity for self-improvement. And more importantly, we're going to miss an opportunity to reach more people and welcome them into the kinds of places that we love. That's just my message for today. It's a short podcast. I hope everybody has a great holiday season. I've got some fun guests coming up here in December. I think we're going to focus a little bit more closely on some issues specific to Kansas City with a few guests. But I hope everybody has a safe and enjoyable holiday season. Take care.